And then our next speakers, Brendan Hart and Yasmin Mayat, are also going to discuss a very specific case study in South Africa. Yasmin Mayat and Brendan Hart both completed their professional architectural degrees at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, and their Master of Philosophy and in Conservation of the Built Environment at the University of Cape Town. They are founding principals of Mayat Hart Architects and Heritage Consultants, an award-winning architectural and heritage practice that combines architecture, research, conservation, and advocacy with considered projects that aim to respond to the rich and complex architectural and social history of South Africa. Both teach at the University of the Witwatersrand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yolanda, for the introduction. Let me just share our screen.
And thank you for the invitation.
So we're going to be talking today about a specific project. It's a building called Aiton Court that is located in Johannesburg. So Aiton Court is a modernist 1930s apartment building located in Hillbrow in Johannesburg. Now, Hillbrow is, many would say it's a notorious suburb in Johannesburg. It's established originally in the 1890s and becomes this very dense modernist townscape, one of the densest population densities in the whole of Africa. It's one of the first sites in Johannesburg, in South Africa, where apartheid segregation laws are broken and people of mixed races start living together. And the environment of Hillbrow has gone from this sort of modernist apartment townscape to a very cosmopolitan Pan-African
community within the African context.
So it's in this context that we found our building and the project took place. So first, to understand how this building emerged. Aiton Court is a modernist building. Modernism as a style of architecture emerges predominantly in Europe in the late 20s and early 30s, and very early on finds itself in the South African context with a group of young architects from the University of the Witwatersrand making contact with French modernist architect Le Corbusier and creating these modern white box villas in the Highveld landscape.
Which you can see is not exactly the best application of the style, but they somehow managed to adapt it to the South African context.
So these are pioneering buildings architecturally, internationally, not just in South Africa. So this is the sort of architectural background in which we find this specific building being created. So the building we're looking at is Aiton Court.
Yeah, so it was built around 1937, and you can see it within the Hillbrow context at the time. It was still the beginnings of the high-rise, so it was still relatively low-rise and suburban.
So the building is built as this highly efficient modernist form of housing. It's the building as a machine, as Le Corbusier would have said. It's minimal space. It's these two parallel blocks, compact single-bedroom apartments, or on higher floors, rooms with shared ablution facilities on a site that would have originally housed a single suburban home for a middle-class family.
Yeah, it also has roof space and interaction areas.
So the building over time evolves and develops socially. So structurally, the building stays relatively the same, but socially it changes over time. Due to economic reasons, huge housing oversupply, the building falls into a state of disrepair. It becomes one of the first spaces in Johannesburg to have mixed residences. So people who are black, white, mixed race, all living in the same building, flouting apartheid law. It's also during this period that the building houses anti-apartheid activists, as well as establishes a mosque on the building's ground floor.
Yeah, it was quite an avant-garde space, which attracted generally a much more liberal resident, artists, professionals, and as Brendan said, a lot of anti-apartheid activists who stayed there.
So from the late 1980s onwards, the building fell into a state of disrepair and decline. So by the time we were approached by the building's new owner, who is a commercial property developer, to come and have a look at the restoration and repair of the building, it had been hijacked, which basically means the legal owner had been effectively thrown out by a group of tenants and illegal occupiers of the building, and had fallen into an extreme state of disrepair.
And obviously in dire need of help and maintenance.
Now, what the challenge we had is that this building is considered to have quite significant heritage value, both because of its architectural significance, as well as because of its social significance in post-apartheid South Africa. But it is in a state of disrepair. Then we also have the challenge of our client being a commercial property developer, wanting to meet certain financial goals.
Yeah, and minimum requirements so that he could let out the apartments as soon as possible.
And incredibly tight budgets. I think the per apartment budget was $1,000 for the repair and restoration work. So what we're doing is balancing repair and restoration with
sustainable and economical design.
So we are using restoration as a tool for recreating the housing. We're looking at the qualities of this housing. Why did it work? Why was it successful in 1937? Why was it internationally published? And exploiting those to make contemporary housing for a lower to middle income apartment dwellers. So you can see we've restored the building. The approach was to try and take it back to what it was.
Yes, and not obviously in the traditional, I would say, first world restoration approach. We were able to bring back a lot of the key elements, but still make it very usable for modern tenants.
So this is, in many ways, restoration we'd like to call it small R, not capital R restoration. This is restoration that is gritty, that is hands-on, that is low cost, but it's looking at values.
So we reinstated the courtyard, brought back some of the water features, and also really petitioned to reinstate the mosque in the ground floor, which provided a very important social anchor to the space, as well as the tone for the area downstairs.
So what has happened with the building subsequently is it's actually worked out to be very successful. The putting money into the regeneration of public spaces versus the private spaces has created a sense of community. When the building was being renovated between 2012 and 2014, we couldn't complete the apartments quick enough because tenants were filling them up as we went. And with the reinstatement of the mosque, it attracted and generated its own community. And visiting the building last year, the mosque has actually expanded. The mosque has now got its own madrasa and school in the building. So it's really this self-sustaining community. And part of that, we've also tried to speak about.
Yeah, a bit of the history, including some information panels for the residents, so they could understand some of the heritage which was attached to the building and some of the important aspects of it.
So this forms a permanent exhibition in the foyer of the building to try and engender this idea of the building has value, the building is important, and the residents, even though they're paying very low rentals, they are quite a high turnover of residents. There's a sense of pride in the building. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much for showing us how the restoration of this inner city apartment building and its functioning religious space serves as a model for future housing projects.